your weekly shot of Gen AI news.
Welcome back, everyone. This week's deep dive is going to be a wild ride through some really huge AI developments. Buckle up, because we're talking about things that could totally reshape how we think about AI in the future.
Yeah, it's been a pretty amazing week.
So to kick things off, we got to talk about Nvidia. We're usually known for their graphics cards, the things that make your games look amazing.
Right.
But they just dropped this bombshell, NVLM 1.0. It's an AI model with, get this, 72 billion parameters.
72 billion. That's massive.
Yeah, I don't even know what that really means, to be honest. I mean, 72 billion of anything sounds like a lot. Can you break it down for us? Like, what do parameters even mean when we're talking AI?
So think of parameters like the brain cells of an AI. The more you have, the more connections the model can make, the more it can learn, the smarter it gets. And 72 billion. That puts NVLM in the same league as some of the most powerful AI models out there, the ones being developed by like Google and OpenAI. It's a big statement.
It's like Nvidia showing up at the Olympics and saying, okay, we're here to compete with the heavy hitters now.
Exactly. But here's the real kicker, the thing that makes this a total game changer. Nvidia made NVLM open source.
Okay, so for anyone who isn't swimming in the world of AI every day like we are, why is open source such a big deal?
It's huge EE. It means they're basically giving away the keys to the castle. Anyone, and I mean anyone, can now access the code behind NVLM, study it, use it, even modify it.
So instead of just a few massive companies controlling the future of AI, we could see this explosion of innovation coming from like startups, smaller companies, even just brilliant people working in their garage.
Absolutely. That's the whole idea behind open source. It democratizes technology, it levels the playing field, and when you have more people, more diverse voices working on something as powerful as AI, that's when you get really exciting breakthroughs, the kind of stuff we can't even imagine yet.
And it's not just about like the number of people working on it, right? It's also about what they choose to do with it. Open source could lead to more ethical AI development, don't you think?
I think so. When you have more eyes on the code, more people thinking about the implications of how AI is being used, it naturally pushes things in a more ethical direction. It's about transparency and accountability, which is something we need more of in the AI world.
Absolutely. And speaking of pushing boundaries, NVLM isn't just another language model. This thing is multimodal.
Right, and that's a really big deal.
Okay, but again, got to make sure everyone's with us here. What does multimodal actually mean in this context?
So think about how we experience the world. We use our senses, right? We see things, we hear things, we process it all together. Most AI models work with just one type of data, like text or images.
They're kind of limited, like working with one hand tied behind their back.
Yeah, exactly. But multimodal AI, like NVLM, can process different types of data at the same time. So it can connect the words you're saying with the image you're showing it, just like we do.
So it's getting closer to how humans actually think and learn.
Exactly. And that opens up a world of possibilities. Imagine AI that can understand memes, analyze medical images alongside patient records, or even help you cook a meal by watching you in the kitchen and offering tips.
That's kind of wild to think about. So we've got this incredibly powerful AI that's now open for anyone to tinker with and build upon. It does feel like we're on the verge of something huge. But with all this amazing AI advancement, well, it kind of makes you wonder, what's the catch? What's the cost of all this? And I'm not talking about the price tag.
That's a really important point. We can't ignore the environmental impact of all of this. Training these massive AI models takes a ton of energy.
It's like we all want the latest gadgets, the fastest phones, but we don't always think about those factories, all that energy it takes to make them.
Yeah, and it's the same with AI. These algorithms, these models, they don't just magically appear. They require a physical infrastructure, and that infrastructure has a carbon footprint.
So where do we even begin to measure something like that? It's not like counting car exhaust, right?
Right, it's much more complex. But there are companies tackling this very issue. One that's doing some really interesting work is Scope 3.
I've heard the name. They're involved in like figuring out the carbon footprint of online stuff, right?
Exactly. They started by focusing on digital advertising. Their founder, Brian O'Kelly, his background is actually in ad tech.
Okay.
And he was really interested in making the industry more efficient, less wasteful. Part of that is looking at energy consumption, right? But then something happened that really made him connect the dots between the digital world and its real world impact.
What happened?
Well, O'Kelly needed heart surgery.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Totally unexpected. And it was during his recovery that he had this kind of epiphany.
Oh, wow.
He realized that the work Scope 3 was doing on tracking the environmental impact of digital advertising. That was just the tip of the iceberg. He saw this much bigger picture, this connection between the rise of AI and its environmental footprint.
So he's recovering from heart surgery, thinking about AI and the planet.
That's exactly it. It was a turning point for him and for Scope 3. They realized that they needed to expand their mission, move beyond just digital ads, and start measuring the carbon footprint of AI as a whole.
So are they like creating some kind of AI impact calculator? How does that even work?
Well, it's complicated, but
Fair.
essentially, they're developing tools to analyze the entire life cycle of an AI model. So everything from the data centers where these models are trained, which use a massive amount of energy,
Right.
to the devices we use to interact with AI, they can look at all of that and help companies identify areas where they can reduce their carbon footprint.
Okay, so it's not just about shaming companies for using too much energy. It's about giving them the tools to actually do something about it.
Exactly. It's about creating more sustainable AI, making sure that this technology develops in a way that doesn't harm the planet. And you know what? It seems like the big players are starting to pay attention. Scope 3 actually just secured a $25 million investment from GV, Google's venture capital arm.
Okay, now that's really interesting. It's one thing for a company like Scope 3 to be doing this work, but when you have a giant like Google investing in it, that tells you something about where things are headed. It's like they're saying, this is important and we need to figure it out.
Right. And it's not just about the money. It's about sending a signal to the entire tech industry that sustainability has to be a part of the conversation, a core value when it comes to AI development. We can't just focus on what AI can do. We have to think about how we're going to do it responsibly.
And that brings up another really important aspect of responsibility when we're talking about AI. Its impact on artists and creators. I mean, think about it. AI can now generate art and content that's practically indistinguishable from human-made work. So how do we protect those creators? How do we make sure they get the credit, the recognition they deserve?
It's a huge question. And honestly, it's something that's keeping a lot of people up at night trying to figure it out. But one company, Adobe, you know them.
Yeah, Photoshop, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're actually taking a really proactive approach to this whole issue. And I think their solution could be a real game changer.
Okay, I'm listening. What are they doing?
So they're developing this thing called the Content Authenticity Web App. It's all about bringing more transparency to digital content. Imagine a world where every piece of art, every photo, every bit of content basically has a digital fingerprint embedded within it.
A digital fingerprint. So you could tell if something was made by a person or by AI.
Exactly. Think
Yeah.
about it. You'd be able to trace the origin of a piece of content, see who created it, when it was created, what tools or software they used. It brings a whole new level of accountability to the digital world.
So this digital fingerprint would reveal if an AI was involved and help if someone tried to pass off AI-generated art as their own work.
Exactly. It's about giving credit where credit is due. Making sure artists are recognized, compensated, the whole deal. But it also gets at this bigger issue of trust. Like, how do we know what's real, what's authentic in a world where AI can create almost anything?
It's like, remember when you first realized that photo you liked online was totally photoshopped? Suddenly, you can't help but wonder what else is fake, right?
Right. And as AI gets better, that line's just going to get blurrier and blurrier. So having tools like this content authenticity thing, it's almost like essential now just to maintain that baseline of trust.
Yeah, I totally see that. It's good to see a company like Adobe, they're kind of in the thick of it all, actually trying to get ahead of this issue.
They are. And it's not just about this web app either. Adobe's also doing some interesting stuff with how they're developing their own AI tools, like their AI image generator, Firefly. They trained it on a data set of licensed content.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly?
It means they're respecting copyright from the start, which is huge EE. A lot of these AI models, they've been trained on, well, basically anything they could get their hands on.
Right.
So this is Adobe trying to set a precedent, saying, hey, we can do this ethically. We can innovate without ripping off artists.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a step in the right direction. Okay, so we've talked about open source AI, the environmental impact, the whole debate about artists and copyright. Can we squeeze in one more topic?
Sure.
Let's talk Uber.
Oh, interesting. What about them?
They're jumping into the AI game too. Apparently, they're working on some kind of AI assistant powered by, get this, GPT-4.
Wow, yeah. That's OpenAI's latest and greatest language model.
The one that's supposedly super advanced, yeah.
Exactly. I actually read something about this. It's not just some vague idea either. They're planning to integrate it directly into the Uber driver app.
Okay, but what's it going to do? Like, is it going to tell me to take a right turn?
Well, at first, it's going to be all about electric vehicles. So think helping drivers navigate the world of EVs,
Smart.
right? Because more and more Uber drivers are switching to electric cars, but it's not always easy.
No, for sure. Figuring out charging stations, making sure you have enough battery, all of that. It's a whole new learning curve.
Exactly. So this AI assistant, it's going to be like having a personal EV expert right there in the car with you. It can answer your questions, give you real-time info on charging stations based on your location. Even eventually they want to incorporate voice support so you're not fiddling with your phone while you're driving.
That makes a ton of sense. And it actually ties back to what we were talking about earlier with Scope 3, right? Sustainability. Uber's making a big push towards electric vehicles, trying to reduce their carbon footprint.
Yeah.
And using AI in this way, it's not just about efficiency, it's about making that transition to EVs easier for drivers.
It's about meeting a real need. I think that's something we'll see more and more of. Companies using AI, not just because it's cool, but because it can actually solve real world problems, make a positive impact.
Okay, so we cannot end this deep dive without mentioning the huge news, the Nobel Prize in Physics. It went to two giants in the world of AI.
I was just going to say, this is so well deserved.
Jeff Hinton and John Hopfield.
Amazing researchers. I mean, talk about laying the foundation for everything we're seeing today.
Seriously, like, these guys are the pioneers.
Hinton, his work on backpropagation, that's fundamental to how AI models learn from data. It's a big deal.
Yeah, and Hopfield, he developed the Hopfield network, right? Used for pattern recognition optimization.
Exactly. And these things might seem kind of abstract, but they underpin so much of what AI is capable of today, from, like you said, self-driving cars to those AI assistants we were just talking about.
It's wild to think about, the work they did decades ago is now shaping the world in ways they probably couldn't have even imagined back then.
It's really incredible. This Nobel Prize is it's a recognition of the long-term impact of their work, because this is just the beginning.
This is it. We are living in the future, folks, and this week has been a pretty wild ride through some of the biggest AI developments out there. We covered everything from like open source models to the environmental impact, the whole artist debate, and of course, the Nobel Prize.
And we only scratched the surface. There's so much more going on.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Espresso AI. Espresso AI. Espresso. Your weekly shot of Gen AI news.